Hey, this is Chuck, and you are listening to Fans with Bands, the podcast where we talk to the fans and the bands they dig about life, music, and whatever the hell else we want to talk about. Today on Fans with Bands, we are talking to Jason from Ferndale Radio 100.7 FM. Check it out. All right. Hey, this is Chuck with Fans with Bands, and I'm talking to Jason from Ferndale Radio. Jason, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great today, Chuck. I'm so happy to be here and ready to talk about some community radio.
Awesome, man. I was talking with you just a little bit before we started going that, I basically stumbled upon Ferndale Radio because I just bought some records at Found Sound, and I was walking through the Rust Belt, and you guys were on the radio, and I ended up popping in there. You invited me in there to talk, and we chatted about music for just a hot second. But I was like, I gotta get hold of Jason and get him on Fans with Bands. So thank you so much for being on this the show.
Oh, thanks for having me on Fans with Bands. I really love kind of the synthesis of what Ferndale's about, and what you're doing with the podcast. And yeah, just perfect that we're here to talk about the radio and the music and the community that's around music in this area. I love it.
Yeah. So how did you get started with Ferndale Radio?
So I would like to start off by saying Ferndale Radio is an entity that has been over 10 years in the making. I just really got on board as a DJ within the last year and a half to 2 years through a friend network of people who were already connected with Ferndale Radio. Ferndale Radio, before I got involved, and I basically show up to an infrastructure on Saturday mornings that has taken over 10 years to make. So back in like 2010, 2011, there were these three friends. They actually lived in Royal Oak at the time. Michelle Morawski, Dave Phillips, who was Michelle's husband, and Jeremy Olstein. And they were friends for a long time. They had a history of college radio back when they were in school. And so they were just talking about casually, having beers on the porch. And they're like, you know what? Wouldn't it be nice to have the college radio around here? And Jeremy, as it turns out, Jeremy Olstein is a teacher and manages another community. So he manages the Kuzno High School radio station in Warren.
Okay.
And so he's really involved in like community radio and all this. And so they put all the hard work into it. They've put 10 years of blood, sweat, and tears into this whole effort. So really, I always want to honor them, Michelle, Dave, and Jeremy, because they had the vision to really, and they had the vision and the determination. Michelle tells this great story about how, once they started dealing with like the FCC, and once they started dealing with like the regulations, some of the enthusiasm was starting to wane.
Right.
And Michelle like kicked the boys in the butt, and she was just like, no, this is going to happen. We're going to work this out, and we're going to have Ferndale Radio. We're going to have community radio. And they had a vision, and I'm so grateful that they saw it through, and we can all benefit from that today.
Yeah. So what kind of coverage area does that? Because I know it says it's a low wattage station. Like, do you know roughly what kind of area in Michigan that covers?
Yeah. So our signal strength is pretty dainty. It's so if you can imagine, you were at the Rust Belt. So the Rust Belt is like an old converted like Federal's department store on the corner of 9 and Woodward in Ferndale, Michigan. This building was built in the 1950s or 40s, or maybe even before then, to sell home goods and wares and all that stuff. It wasn't set up to be a radio station, of course, but also what it's turned into, which is the Rust Belt market. The Rust Belt market is the genius of Chris Best. He's the guy who really got the Rust Belt market off the ground. And he agreed to partner with Jeremy, Michelle, and Dave, not really partnered, but agreed to allow Ferndale Radio to broadcast from the Rust Belt Market at 9 and Woodward. So if you can imagine 9 and Woodward, our tower only extends 25 feet above the building's roof.
Okay.
So the radio signals are not surpassing the curvature of the earth at that height. In fact, if you know where 9 Mile is, and you know where the Detroit Zoo is north, and you know where like the state fairgrounds are to the south, and you know where like Oak Park is to the west and Hazel Park is to the east, that's really the border of what we're able to transmit. But last year, through a fundraising campaign and grassroots and like a lot of hard work and fundraising, they were able to set up our streaming infrastructure. So now if you go to FerndaleRadio.com, you can stream us globally. In fact, that's what's been very cool in the time that I've been a DJ, which kind of coincided with them having this streaming ability.
Okay.
Because we have DJs now who come on who have friends and family in Phoenix or in Colorado or Florida, and you can stream across the country and globally to anybody, which has been really, really fun. That's awesome. That's so cool.
So, what was your journey? How did you get involved with Ferndale Radio?
So it's funny, during COVID, it seems we all have a COVID story.
I know.
Yeah, everybody's got a COVID story, right? I have a few of them actually, but the one that's pertaining to my involvement with Ferndale Radio is, and this is the spirit of Ferndale Radio. In fact, Jeremy Olstein described it as just like listening to some tunes with a friend or neighbor, because that's exactly who they are on the radio. They're probably your friend or probably your neighbor. And during the COVID pandemic and the shutdowns and everyone's isolating, and I need music, I need live music, I need to talk about music with people. So we just started this little Facebook group. It was like a mixtape. So it was a weekly kind of potluck mixtape where, I think at one time we had like up to 100 people on Facebook who every week, sometimes we had themes, but mostly it was just like, hey, what cool song do you want to throw on the mixtape? Yeah. And we all, everybody loves mixtapes, especially of our generation. I mean, the kids now, I mean, they make their playlists, and I guess that's,
sort of a variation of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a variation, but we all know like the classic mixtape, on the Maxwell 90 with, 2 sides.
Oh, yeah.
You scribble in the song titles, and maybe if it's someone special you're sending it to, maybe you put a few hearts or some sort of artwork, and you always put the most thought into like song sequencing and like intention. It was a craft. It was really a talent to make a great mixtape. So we kind of took that spirit into like the Facebook, because it was easy, not because we like are particularly enamored with Facebook, but people were on it and it was easy. So every week we would have these like 40 to 50 song playlists. And one of the women who was in that group, she's a neighbor and a friend of mine, and Audrey Colvert. And Audrey was already a DJ, and this is kind of how it works. What I've found is you kind of somebody who's already a DJ. They kind of, I don't know, vouch for you or kind of point you in the right direction. But Audrey was like, Jay, I really love this mixtape. It's a great kind of relief from all the pandemic bullcrap. And so Audrey actually gave my name to Dave Phillips, who, I don't know if he was president at the time, but they have a rotating board. But the board definitely runs the station, and they bring on DJs to help fill these spots. Yeah. And so one of the ways that you get on the DJ list is you have to send Dave a mixtape. So I was so worried. I was so funny. Like it was like he was some paramour and I was trying to like, court him or something.
Right.
But I was like, man, what is Dave gonna like? Because I didn't know Dave until after they let me on the radio. Dave is a totally sweet. He's a great guy. Him and Michelle is really, those two. I mean, it's a group effort, but those two are really, part of the heart and soul of that radio station. And I remember trying to mix up my tape a little bit. I think I had some 70s funk in there and some like, oh, what did I have? Oh, I had some Band of Horses. I think I had some yeah, I was all over the map, but I was trying to
That's cool.
keep it like broad, because I didn't, like I said, I didn't really know where Dave was coming down on it.
Yeah.
But they're like, okay, it's tolerable. I think that's kind of where they came down with. Is like, it didn't like hurt their ears in any kind of offensive way. So next thing I know, Dave sent me an email and was like, hey, we're gonna invite you on the Facebook page, and because that's where they have a local Facebook page, and that's where everyone kind of signs up for DJ shifts. And
Okay.
so then I was in. So really, I owe my connection to Audrey, who, I don't know, we'll have to follow up with her and see how she got in. But
Yeah.
but yeah, and that was 2 years ago, and since then it's grown. We had our DJ list is continually expanding. And one of the things I love about it is, now I can, I've brought some other voices, some other DJs into the rotation. Each DJ kind of brings somebody new. And then honestly, like just our connection, the way you and I met through the open door at Rust Belt, like people just stop by and they're like, oh my God, this is so cool. I
Yeah.
want to get on, I'd love to have a slot, or can I play some songs? And really, I don't have the email in front of me, but if you email, I think there's actually a link on the ferndaleradio.com, an email address. And if you're interested, if anybody out there is interested and they, want to learn more about Ferndale Radio and how to become a DJ,
Yeah.
please find that email. I should probably look it up, or maybe we
Well,
could add it later.
yeah, I'll be putting together like show notes and everything with links and stuff after when this gets posted, so we can definitely get it on there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Because I would encourage anyone who's ever interested in, running a 2-hour set, or, being a DJ or being on the radio, either having college experience or radio or high school radio experience, or even, I mean, it saddens me to say, but there 20-30 years ago, Detroit was a great radio market.
Yeah.
And it was filled with great radio personalities, great radio DJs. The sad thing that I've seen happen to radio in the last 30 to 40 years is it's gone national, it's gone corporate, it's gone syndicated. So now, even if you turn on a station that's broadcasting from the Fisher Building or downtown or Southfield or wherever, chances are that the content is coming from,
outside
somewhere else.
Yeah.
So, and that was really to get to the heart of it and to kind of talk about, the community aspect of it. That's really what I think at the heart of it, that's what Ferndale Radio is all about. It's like this really hyper local focus. And, radio has so much competition for our ears that it didn't have 30, 40 years ago. Streamings, podcasts, all this stuff. But the way radio, I believe, can really carve out a spot that other forms of media have, even, the new forms, is like having that really local focus.
Yep.
That's what you do. I love. So that's why I feel like there's like this symbiosis between like,
right.
What you're doing and what Ferndale Radio is doing. Because it's kind of getting at the heart of like, okay, yes, we're not, some global corporate, mega channel. What we are, and what I think people want and crave, are these like really hyper local voices, these local outlets, this connection between your neighbor
Yeah.
and the music on the radio. Like that is a very special lane to be in. And I feel like Ferndale Radio is thriving and will continue to thrive because I genuinely believe there's enough listeners out there, both streaming and in their cars, that this is a refreshing break from the expected kind of pablum that you would get
Yeah.
on a
Like,
corporate radio station.
yeah, Sirius or whatever, right?
Yeah.
They've got like the
Yeah.
dialed in, DJ that make you think you're still listening to like a homegrown radio show or it's like some kind of deep cuts thing, but it's really just whatever's been pre-programmed and they're just kind of rattling off some stuff and it's always the same songs and
Yeah. I mean, there's an aspect of kind of some of the streaming, or some of the Sirius radio. Like, I kind of liked what Little Steven was doing,
yeah,
and Co Melina from Co and the the Knockouts and the Dirt Bomb. She's local, but she doesn't. I think she does a. They were moving her around a lot, but you can do great sets on the Sirius or the streaming, but it's still just like one step removed from that live experience with
yeah,
listener DJ. It's still one step removed, and Ferndale Radio, I think, is the one of the outlets in our area, where you can still get that live on air interaction, and you don't know what's going to happen. I did not know, right, that Chuck
right.
was gonna like walk into our lives at Rust Belt that one Saturday. But I'm so glad you did, and that's kind of like the spontaneity and the spark that you just can't get on other forms of media.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's really cool that because the signal is, uh, you know, it's very local, but you can get it, like you said, across the world, really. So if folks have know Ferndale or know this area, then they can kind of spread their wings, go, and still keep a little tab on the local scene. So how does Ferndale Radio, like as far as like local bands, what kind of programming and I guess outlet does Ferndale Radio provide for like local musicians?
So I know our board, and I know Michelle and Jeremy and Dave have always made it the intention to be an outlet for local musicians, local bands, local festivals. I know Ferndale has developed a summer schedule with a lot of music festivals,
Yeah,
and I know that they have relationships with the programmers of the festivals. My understanding is that is something that they are really trying to build out. So I think, bands throughout Michigan, bands throughout Southeast Michigan, we just need to make those connections
yeah,
between the programming on Ferndale Radio and the local hyper local the bands,
yeah,
the Michigan bands, especially the Michigan bands, because I think some of the national touring acts, they're kind of the national touring acts. I think they have their press agents, they have their kind of routines, they have their
yeah,
kind of structure. It's really in the same way that the community radio aspect of Ferndale Radio is something that the corporate media can't really replicate. Like having the local bands on, I think is just like a marriage made in heaven, because it's like it's bolstering the legitimacy of Ferndale Radio as a community radio station if you're having bands from the community on the radio station.
yeah,
The way it's worked in the past, and like I said, there's a whole many DJs over the years who have had spots and worked on the programming. A lot of times it'll be, hey, can you come in during the 12 noon hour and talk about your show, and maybe play a few songs. The problem is, and you and you were there, our studio is really tiny.
Yeah.
The actual Ferndale studio is immensely micro tiny. So and that's one of the reasons too we leave the door open. Otherwise it gets that
We get
really
hot
like
as hell.
claustrophobic feel. Yeah. So like setting up a drum kit, setting up, you know, a whole set is not really practical right now.
Yeah.
But I know Chris at Rust Belt has talked in the past of, you know, opening up parts of the Rust Belt itself for, and they do live music there.
Yeah.
They do a lot of great activities at the Rust Belt, including like weddings and parties and all this stuff. And so just making those connections between the bands and Ferndale Radio are vitally important. I would say we have to, as a radio station, it is a priority, and we just need to make those connections
Yeah, because
for the bands.
I think it would be like a huge seller. Because I've talked to other people in Southeast Michigan, musicians in particular, about like, um, there's well, first there's like just a ton of great music here, but I think it's still sort of under the radar in some respects because you know you got a town like say Austin or I don't know, thinking of Austin because they are just known for music. Nashville, um, whereas Detroit used to be known for that the Detroit area, Southeast Michigan, and it seems that it isn't as much. And I think that would be a great way for to kind of you know either print media, radio, all these types of you know podcast streaming to kind of focus in. And yeah, like you said, if you can get the connections with the local musicians and get some of that into the mix, I think that would help you know the folks that are really into you know, like band X at this national band. They listen to a local band, and they go, oh, you know, sort of similar or something I really like, you know, but they didn't know about them. And they're playing right down over at, you know, the Loving Touch. And it's like, oh, cool. I can go down there and check them out, you know? So yeah, that would be cool. It'd be awesome.
Yeah. And I think that's something that, you could help with, and like those type of connections. And that's what's exciting about, you know, building on week to week, the people we meet at the Rust Belt, the people we meet on our shows, is that, you know, you do feel like you're building connections, building, you know, networking with these really incredible, awesome musical artists and or people beyond just like the musical artists, just like the people who love music. Because it's
Right.
funny when people, and that's why you were so great, because you know we leave that door open and people walk by, and you could tell the people that are curious, you could tell the people that are like, oh my god, don't look at me. And then you know there's like you, and you were just like, yeah, let's do this, like let's talk about music, let's play some songs. And that it's just that fervent love of music, that love of, you know, bands. That's what we hope we can grow with Ferndale Radio week to week. And yeah, I know that's what we go in there for, is, you know, to try and you know, talk about these bands, these musicians, these songs that people love. And yeah, kind of just keep the radio going, keep the local music scene. It's funny when you bring up Austin or, you know, Nashville or some of these other towns, you know, that are currently in favor,
Yeah.
you know, nationally as far as hubs of music. And I do have a really strong point of pride, you know, for this area.
Yeah.
I just feel like we have such a legacy here with music in Michigan and Detroit, in Southeast Michigan in particular. Like you don't just get to be Detroit Rock City or the Motor City or Motown, or you don't get to wear those badges without some hard work. And
Yeah.
I do feel like the generations before us, you know, and I think there's all kinds of socioeconomic reasons why, like, Motown flourished, and how, like, the Stooges and the MC5 like got their sound, and like, John Lee Hooker, and how
Right.
his like experience in Detroit helped craft, blues music, and with that, and you go into like the techno and the Bellevue 3, and like how their experience shaped that whole genre of music. And I'm just always fascinated by the kind of layers of Detroit musical history. And I do feel like we do have to do more in the current day to kind of popularize what's going on now. And so an
Yeah.
outlet like Ferndale Radio is a perfect opportunity to kind of bolster that next generation of incredible music makers, because it's been proven that whatever is, it's either the Detroit River, or the climate, or maybe it's the industrial fumes, or whatever it is.
Right.
But Detroit, I mean, in this area, is our historical legacy is, I think, unquestioned globally
Yeah.
even.
Oh yeah,
So
for sure.
that requires us all to kind of step up and do what it takes to preserve that and encourage the next generation.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it also, and I was thinking while you were talking that we really need like some leadership from the folks that are marketing the tourism to Michigan, to kind of play on that fact that we do have great music, and that there are all these clubs, and that it's not just about cherries in Traverse City, and you know I don't know, the Riverwalk, which is awesome, but there's more to Detroit, there's more to Ferndale, there's more to Royal Oak than just bars or restaurants. There's other things that would want you to come here. And I think that's the piece that gets missing. I think that's the part where me and you and Ferndale Radio and fans of bands can kind of like hopefully reach somebody a little, up in the tourism area and say, hey, Pure Michigan, talk about these things. That's what I think. I think it needs that money, and it needs that kind of focus, because the
Yeah.
music's here. I mean, I see it all the time. I'm gonna go to this weekend. This will go out well after that's out. But there's Fuzz Fest. It's 3 days. A local musician, Chris Taylor, who used to be he's in Mazinga. He used to play with. He actually knew Ron Ashton, and he's a younger dude. But anyway, he's putting on this festival, Fuzz Fest, which is like kind of DIY rock, punk, hard rock, experimental stuff. And it's awesome. But, if you're not in the know as far as being in Ann Arbor, or, pay attention to what's going on at the Blind Pig or something like that, it's kind of lost. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I no, I think you're entirely right about kind of the leadership. I look back on some of the earlier periods, and I think the geography of kind of where these venues were, whether you're talking about the Grandy
Yeah.
Ballroom, or you're talking about, some of the raves, or the techno that was going on, we need kind of like that location, that maybe Austin or Nashville, they have that strip, or they have that like
Right.
mile of venues, and it's really easy for a tourist to fly into Austin, and I don't know what the street is, but I know there's an avenue of
Yeah.
bars and concert venues and stuff like that. And Detroit's a little more spread out. You kind of got to know where to
Where
go.
to
You got to
go.
know the
Yeah.
Blind Pig, or you go to the Majestic, or L Club. Everything's kind of a little more spread out here. It's not just like, oh, drop me off here and I can see 10 bands in 2 blocks.
Yeah.
um but you're right, that is only communicated through like knowledgeable outreach to people. I there's times, though, I have to be honest with you, Chuck, where it's like I've been to Detroit shows, and maybe it's just like the old timer in me, and maybe it's just like the get off my lawn in me that's starting to develop. But like I sometimes are like, come on, this is Detroit. Like people on their cell phones or people
Oh
like sitting
yeah.
on their hands. Like it really bugs me. Like when I go to some of these shows and kind of, the audience participation is not what I would expect out of a Detroit
Yeah.
audience, and a lot of these touring acts, they know about Detroit. Like if you're a musician, I don't care if it's, punk or rock or techno or whatever, Detroit and Detroit's history. And if you're coming on your tour to Detroit and a bunch of like people show up on their cell phones and people are not like engaged,
Yeah.
that's on us. And so I would also just say, like, if I could just give my little like stump speech, is like,
Yeah.
Detroit, go to a show and represent. Like,
Yeah.
be a Detroit. Like, get off your hands, get off your phones.
Yeah. Or
Like
stand
be
around
the
in the back.
yeah
Like, so the band's up front in a small club. Everyone's standing in the back talking. Like, what the fuck?
yeah
Get
bothers the hell out of me. It really
get up
bothers the
front
hell out
and
of me.
just pay attention. If you don't like it, then I get it, right? You can do whatever you need to do, but there's got to be at least a handful of people that are like, "Oh yeah, this is cool. I want to check it out." Right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. No,
Yeah, that drives me
I
crazy
mean,
too when people are sitting in the back of the club going, "What the hell? Why aren't you up front? Come on."
right. Oh yeah, oh yeah. And it's funny. I feel like there's kind of like a duty that maybe a duty if you're going to a concert in Detroit, you almost have a duty, I think, to kind of maintain that legacy. And maybe you don't have that same legacy to uphold if you're from Columbus or St. Louis, but this is Detroit Rock City. Come
Yeah.
on, people. Let's go.
That's right.
But it's fun. And so the thing about the bands and the community radio, I really think like that is a key part of how Ferndale Radio grows in the coming years, is incorporating and being a nexus for live music, for local bands. I think, and I know the leadership of the station. I know Jeremy and Michelle and Dave and the whole board. Yeah, they see it the same way. It's just kind of like orchestrating that and putting
Yeah,
that to practice.
that's cool.
But I would also encourage, it's just like people earlier, we were talking about people who were interested in DJing. Yeah, and I know you're really big on this with local music and local musicians. So please, yeah, go to ferndaleradio.com, find that email, and yeah, if you're a band, just send Dave or send them an email and be like, hey, we'd love to come in and talk to Jay on, Saturday. If you
Right.
can get out of bed at 11 in the morning, 10 in the morning, and come out and talk to us. We'll have whoever on the radio.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I
but
think that's cool.
yeah, no, it's great. And it's part of the open door. And again, I keep harping on this, but I love this aspect of it. We were on the radio earlier this summer, and there's a gentleman who walked by, and I noticed he walked by because he slowed down a little bit, and he was like trying to figure out what was going on. And then when he
Yeah.
figured out what was going on, he kind of had like a little nod, and then about 3 or 4 minutes later, because Rust Belt, there's so many great artists there, there's so much great stuff there. It's such a great place to kind of wander and check out all the incredible wares that are available. And so this guy did another lap, came by, stopped, and I'm like, hey, how you doing? We're on the radio here. And us, usually my intro is, do you have a music? Do you have a song? Would you like us to play a song? Like, who's
Right.
your favorite artist? Just trying to get somebody to think about music. And this guy's like, well, actually, I'm the tour manager for the Whalers,
Oh no
and the
shit.
Whalers were actually playing at the Magic Bag in Ferndale that night. They had played the night before in Columbus, and they came in on their tour bus, and they were the actual Whalers were sleeping in the parking lot, but in their tour
Right.
bus. But the tour manager had gotten up, and he was just, he had a coffee, and he was just kind of checking out Ferndale, Michigan. And so we
That's
had
awesome.
this great impromptu. We did a bunch of Whaler songs, and that's what's really cool too about the Ferndale Radio. We we just pull up whatever songs we want and we just play them. The leadership have taking care of all the the
Yeah, the
legalities
league.
and
Yeah,
allowed the licensing, but the DJs are pretty much free to play whatever we want, short of no profanity, no
yeah.
like really offensive stuff, but short of that, we can play anything. And when the tour manager from the Whalers was in studio, we just brought up about 6 great Whalers tracks, and he was able to talk about them. He was talking about
That's
the
cool.
tour, and yeah, it was great. It was a very spontaneous moment. A great example of why community radio is just
Yeah,
it's so unique. Yeah.
that's such a treat, though, for anybody listening or just being in the vicinity, because they're just like, wow. I mean, how often, like you said, that's a huge plug for community radio, because how often are you going to get that kind of experience where somebody just comes in and all of a sudden, oh, they're the tour manager, for a major band, and you're like, oh, yeah, let's play some tunes and hang out and talk about music. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's such a great vibe, and it's really kind of what got me into the kind of the Ferndale radio was just this idea that we're gonna play some tunes, we're gonna talk about some tunes, we're gonna laugh, we'll probably say some stupid stuff, or reminisce about
Right.
some show we saw back in the day. We'll probably meet somebody new, we'll hear a song we haven't heard before, and it's just such a eclectic exciting you know time on the
Yeah.
radio. So yeah, we're just trying to do our little part. Like I said, I feel so fortunate for the work that's done behind the scenes, because it's not easy. I mean, if you and
Yeah.
I just like right now we're like, okay, we're gonna start Royal Oak Radio, or we're gonna start Ann Arbor Radio, or it takes years to kind of go through the red tape to get through the process, so we can get these songs, we can get these community voices on the air. So I'm always eternally grateful for the work that goes on behind the scenes, not only the technical work of making sure that signal goes out our little 20-foot tower and
Right.
streaming on radio, but the fundraising, because it's not
Yeah.
cheap, it's not for free. So I mean, it is nonprofit, but it doesn't mean it's for free, right?
Yeah. Right.
We got to do the fundraising and all that stuff. So there's so much work that goes into it behind the scenes that I
Yeah.
just feel so grateful that Saturday mornings I can show up, open the door, flick on the mic, and just play some great tunes.
That's awesome. So how did you get involved with, like what was your journey into music? Did you have a musical household? Did you play an instrument? Were you in a band?
I would say I did have a musical household. My mom was my mom and dad were really I was born in the 70s, so like 70s. She was big, they were big on, the Beatles, of course, and but she would play a lot of singer-songwriter stuff, and it was always on. That's what I
Uh,
remember about my childhood, is that there was always like a record spinning or a tape deck playing. And yeah, it just became really part of my makeup. But I never played in a band. I never perfected an instrument. In fact, we were forced to play choose an instrument in grade school for 1 year, and I
yeah.
picked the saxophone, because even then, even as I think this was like 7th or 8th grade, even then I just intuitively knew like saxophone is so freaking cool. Like, John Coltrane and Dexter Gordon and all these guys, it's just like that's the instrument, right? Like
Yeah.
the sax. And so I had these visions of how this like white suburban kid was gonna like grow up and like play in some seedy jazz club in Paris one day. But I never put in the work. I never put in the work. I love the image, right? I
Yeah.
remember
Oh
being in
yeah.
front of the mirror and I just like, have that sneer looking back
Yeah.
on the sax, but I never really put in the work. In fact, I'll do a shout out to my buddy Alan Bogle. I remember I sat next to Alan Bogle for our the actual recital, and I hummed all the parts while Alan played all the notes, and I just kind of like moved my saxophone. That was like the height of my musical like stage life. But I
Awesome.
always loved music. Went to high school. I remember like sitting in the parking lot of my high school in Warren. I went to De La Salle in Warren, and I remember my buddy Jamie Lapicolo. We started talking about Led Zeppelin. This was like late 80s, and so I was born in 73, so I really missed out on like live Zeppelin,
Yeah.
but I was kind of like that second generation of being exposed to, and I remember Jamie, I was talking to Jamie one day and I'm like, do you know that one song that goes da 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 da? And he's like, Kashmir? Like he had to like explain to me like what Kashmir was. And I'm like, oh yeah, where did that song come from? And Jamie had this really cool older sister, and it's this like the stereotypical like older sibling who like had all the
Had all
great
those, yeah.
albums. And so we just started going through all the Led Zeppelin catalog, the Alice Cooper catalog, like
Awesome.
all those albums. And I remember, we just go out on lunch breaks and just jam out to 10 Years Gone or Song
Oh
Remains the
man.
Same.
Yeah.
Just great memories. And then when I went to college, I went to Central Michigan University in Mount Pleasant, and they had a really great they have a really great student campus radio station. They have a public radio station, and I actually was in the broadcasting department, and I got to do a few spins on the radio. I didn't have like a show. I was more in the video department, but I was able to, as part of the curriculum, to get on the radio a few times, and I just loved it. And then like the whole college environment of meeting people who have wholly different musical lineages than you. I mean, that's
Right.
really where I started. Roommate loved jazz, so all of a sudden I was exposed to jazz. And then another roommate loved the honky tonk country stuff, so I remember
Awesome.
listening to a lot of that for the first time. And it was just a great period of musical exploration. And then and that really kind of cemented music in my life. It was just like, I'm always gonna go see shows, I'm always gonna buy records, I'm always gonna go seek out live music.
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate now. I turned 50 this year, and I look back on it, I'm like, man, I've had great runs of seeing shows, seeing bands. Like I feel like you and I mean, people talk about best eras to grow up in. I mean, I feel like I missed out on some of the stuff in the 60s and 70s, and
Yep. Yeah.
the jazz stuff of the 50s. And I missed out on all that, but we've had a nice run, I would
Oh, for
say, for the
sure.
last 50
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. I definitely feel very fortunate, to get into it because I got into heavy metal like, yeah, well, I think the hard rock stuff started with Kiss, but then, progressed from there. But, I've been able to see like that the whole rise of all that stuff, I got to see Iron Maiden open up for, Rainbow and stuff. So I feel totally privileged. Got to see Rush or like not not as early as I wanted to see them, but I did get to
Yeah.
see, moving pictures. So but yeah, and then the evolution of all these bands and now they're, Rush is, well, no more, but the 40th anniversary tour they had, or other bands that are doing like a 35th anniversary of this album or that album. You're like, wow, I saw that band when they started, like Alice in Chains, got to see them at, the St. Andrews, when Lane was still in the bands. Like, yeah.
Oh my God. One of my greatest and this is what I love, Chuck. I love kind of talking about, this is my sweet spot, is just like talking about shows. So I didn't get to see Alice in Chains when they were at St. Andrews, but I saw when they were at the State Theater.
Oh,
And I'll never forget this. We had worked our way down to the front of the stage before the band came on, and there was this rustling behind. They had the curtain drawn, and there was all this rustling, and you could hear them like tuning their instruments, and then all of a sudden the curtain in front dropped, and there was this huge cargo net that was across the stage, and Lane was like embroiled. He was like, kind of like entwined like a spider in a web, and he had those glasses on, and he was just like snarling. And they did I think they started with We Die Young.
oh
And I
man.
was just like, oh my gosh, this is like the most incredible start to a show ever.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just stuff like that. It's just awesome. Like I said, I've been very fortunate. I've seen some really good shows. I've been fortunate.
Awesome. So what was the first show you ever went to?
It's so funny. We just were talking about this the other day because why did this come up? Something about the Rolling Stones. So 87. So that was my like classic rock phase for sure. And I had an affinity for like the early Stone, like not the early Stones, but like
Yeah, Beggar's Banquet or something.
yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Exile on Main Street,
Yeah.
just some of my favorite albums. By the time they got to 87 and the Steel Wheel stuff, it was like, okay, they're still crafting nice songs, but it's not like the Stones of the 70s,
Yeah.
you know?
It's not Sticky Fingers.
It's not Sticky Fingers, right? Exactly. But they were playing at the Silverdome, and the opening band was Living Color. And
Oh, wow.
Living Color was just breaking, with Cult of Personality and that monster riff. And I was just like, I wanted to go see the Stones, but I was probably more like hyped to see Living Color.
Yeah.
And so I went to that show. I was at the Silverdome. It was packed, and I actually sat in the last row of the Silverdome on stage left for the Rolling Stones with Living Color opening up. And yeah, that was my first one. I think I was what was that? 80, I was like, no, I had to be 16 because we drove there.
Cool.
So I was either like 16 or 17, but yeah, it was a great
Awesome.
memory. And the Stones were the Stones, and yeah, so that was my first one.
Awesome. So I know this is super hard, but like, what was one of your most memorable concerts you've ever went to? Like something that always sticks with you, and if somebody's like, "Oh man," they just for you, it's like, "Man, that was a show."
Well, there's been a few. Yeah, this is really hard because there's
Yeah.
like 5 or 6 that are fluttering right to the back of my eyelids right now, competing for the nomination. But I'll say, well, Flaming Lips. I saw Flaming Lips play at Masonic in the fall of, I think it was 1999, or no, the fall of 2000. And that was the first time I ever seen Flaming Lips, and they were incredible. And they ended their set with an enormous confetti cannon, and no one from that show escaped unscathed from the confetti. Everybody was just covered, like literally covered in confetti. It was like a blizzard of confetti. And back then we used to always go to like Lafayette, Coney Island afterwards,
Oh,
get
cool.
some food,
Right.
and so me and my buddies sat down in the center aisle, and we were covered in confetti. And there's this guy there who used to work there. His name was Nemo, and his name was Demo.
Demo.
I'm sorry. And Demo saw that this group of girls were walking in, and they were also all covered in confetti. So he didn't know what was going on, but he sat them right across from us. And immediately we knew, like, oh, these are the coolest girls ever. They're just at this Flaming Lips show.
Right.
And so we hit it off and we started talking and numbers were exchanged. And I ended up marrying one of them.
What?
So I met my
Really?
wife. Yeah. So I
Oh
met my
my
wife
God.
after a Flaming Lips show at at Lafayette, Coney Island.
Holy
So
crap. That's
that one's
incredible.
gotta be the most memorable one.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as like just flat out, experiences, yeah, there's been a few of them.
I know it's tough because there's,
Yeah,
so many
it
shows and you're like, oh, I
it's
remember this and this and this.
yeah, no, it's very, very tough. But I remember, um, so the band Protomartyr? There's this
Yes.
band,
Yeah.
yeah. So Protomartyr, they're out right, they're kicking ass right now. They're awesome Detroit band, and they played this bar down in the Cass Corridor called Jimbo's, Jumbos, and it was a Thanksgiving show. And so in this bar, it's a dive bar. It's really Spartan on the inside, but they for Thanksgiving they set up like a turkey and they had stuffing, and
Awesome.
so people go there. Um, but once they started playing, the band was just like so in their element and so tuned in, and the place was packed. It's a small bar, but it was absolutely packed. It was sweltering on the inside, even though it was freezing on the outside. And the stage is just this really like small 6-inch riser. So they were basically in the middle of this
Yeah.
crowd playing this set and just tearing through it. And I remember I somehow had worked my way up to the front, and people were jumping up and dancing, or just like, and at one point my momentum kind of threw me up. It was like a leap, but then the leap was assisted with like the crowd push. And next thing I know, I was in the ceiling. It was a drop ceiling, and my head was like protruding through the drop ceiling. And I was like, oh my, and like tile dust is like flying and falling on people. And man, just like the shrieks of just like pure unadulterated joy. It was just like, and the band didn't stop. They just like
Right.
rifled through their set. And that one always comes to mind because it's fun. And
Yeah.
but yeah, I've been very fortunate to see a lot of great music over the years.
Awesome. Is there any bands that you haven't seen that you hope to see, um, that are
Yeah,
still
well, I
potentially doing some tours and stuff like that, or new bands that you're just like, oh, I really want to see them live?
um I would say there's this it's funny, my daughter, all three of our children have kind of really generated some really great of their own personal taste,
That's cool.
and yeah, it's been really cool. And it's not necessarily anything that we played a ton of music and we took them to a bunch of shows. In fact, the only time I've been to Red Rocks out in Colorado, we took the family to see Flaming Lips because of
Awesome.
the connection. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was an incredible show. I remember there was so much weed at that show, and our kids were all young, and but the cloud was just so prevalent.
Right.
So, and he comes out in this he does the thing where Wayne comes out with this bubble, and he gets in the bubble and he kind of like crawls over the crowd, and it's really this like it's a variation on like stage diving, or kind of like
Yeah.
walking the crowd. It's very cool. They pull it off. But I remember it was like my 8-year-old, he wasn't even 8 at the time, I think he was maybe younger than that, but I think they were being affected by this smoke. And my son, and he's got the sweetest, like biggest eyes, and he just looks up at me and he's like, Dad, when is it my turn in the bubble? he wanted to have a turn in the bubble. That's when it was like, okay, we're
Oh
gonna go to the
man.
parking lot now. But that was a great show. But yeah, so my daughter, she's really turned me on to like the whole Phoebe Bridgers and Boy, there's this band called Boy Genius that's it's Phoebe Bridgers, Lucy Dacus, and Julian Barker, I think. And they have an album out right now. They're touring it. I didn't get to see them on this tour, but I would say that one definitely pops up as one I would like to see again.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I would go with that one.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Jason, thank you so much for being on Fans with Bands. I really appreciate it. And I've got one last question. That is, pineapple or no pineapple on pizza?
Pineapple.
Pineapple. All right.
Live a little.
Any particular topping combination do you enjoy?
Oh man, pizza. I mean, music. I love music, but I love pizza almost as much. And again, that's another thing, man. This is one of the reasons I feel blessed. Like we grew up in this area. We grew up in Detroit, which in my mind has the best musical pedigree of any town on the face of the earth. And I also believe legitimately we have the best pizza on the face of the frickin' earth. I mean, how lucky was I to be born with the best music and the best pizza? Yeah, but no, I don't think there's any bad toppings. I've never been scared of a topping on a pizza. Somebody gave me a pizza recently that had honey on it. Like it had honey drizzle on it. I think they called it like the Stinger, the East Side Stinger or something. I don't know, but that was a delicious pizza. And I'm like, honey on a pizza? No,
yeah,
that was good. So, I just like I want to support experimental musical artists.
Yeah,
I want to support the experimental pizza artists out there. So, yeah, I'm not gonna poo-poo pineapple. I'm not gonna whatever you want to put on there.
Awesome. Yeah, I like pineapple in its place, but not on the pizza. That's
a fair point. But maybe you should live a little, Chuck. Come on.
I know.
No, I joke.
Awesome.
We went down to Cedar Point one time, and we were stopped at some pizzeria in Ohio, and they put macaroni and cheese on the pizza.
Really?
It was like macaroni. It was like totally.
Holy cow!
I thought it was going to be disgusting. My kids were all into it, and I'm like, that's not so bad.
Awesome. Well, Jason, thanks again, and I'll be sure to be tuned into Ferndale Radio.
Yeah, and please let everybody know if you're a band, if you're an aspiring DJ, please reach out to Ferndale Radio. We want to make those connections. And yeah, Chuck, thank you so much. Keep doing what you're doing with Fans with Bands, because I think it's of the same spirit as Ferndale Radio. So we just support each other and grow it out.
Cool. Sounds good, man. All right. Take it easy.
All right. Take care, Chuck.
Many thanks to Jason for joining me in this episode of Fans with Bands. It was so cool to talk with Jason about Ferndale Radio and how he got involved with them. This small community radio station with a little studio in Rust Belt Market is awesome. If you're in the area, stop by, or at least tune in at 100.7 FM. You can also stream Ferndale Radio live at their website. Be sure to keep up to date on shows and events through their website and socials. See the show notes for all the details and links. Bands are nothing without you, the fans. Purchasing music and merchandise is critical to their survival. If you can help out your favorite bands, please do. If you're in Michigan, consider following the Playing in Detroit Area Tonight and SE for Southeast Michigan Music Facebook pages. They are fantastic places for fans and bands to support each other and share our combined love of music. Thank you all so much for listening. Be sure to hit subscribe on your favorite podcast service to get each and every episode of Fans with Bands. Spread the word by rating the show, telling your friends, telling your neighbors, telling your family, telling your priest, tell everyone, and leave a comment. We want to hear what you think. You can keep in touch by following us on social media. This is a Life in Michigan production. Until next time, be well and kick out the jam.